Hello. We've been talking about signs and seasons. We've been talking about signs and seasons in the sky, astral bodies, heavenly alignments, and their significance for events on Earth. We've also been considering what possible relationship exists, explanatory frameworks for the relationship between the sky and the ground, heaven and earth. Is there a chain of causation, as suggested by Al-Kindi, the father of Arabic philosophy, whereby there's a first cause and then there are intermediate causes via the stars and planets that stream down onto the planet? Or do we have a parallelism, a synchronicity, such that the sky and the ground reflect and mirror each other, because perhaps they are both manifestations of a deeper phenomenon? We looked around the world as well. We touched on a few places that have traditions of astronomy and what we'd call astrology. We looked at cycles of the planets. We mentioned that Jupiter, for example, has a 12-year cycle. So in the West, those people who followed Jupiter and its significance consider the 12-year cycle as important. But we should also note that in Chinese astrology, the cycle of 12 years is important as well. And each year in the cycle is assigned an animal. For the Chinese, we are currently in the year of the dragon. And everybody is born and every event happens in a particular year, whether it's the year of the rat or the year of the tiger or the year of the snake or the monkey, and so on. And so the Chinese have been, since time immemorial, looking at the heavens and looking at what transpires on Earth in terms of 12-year cycles, taking it a year at a time. And for a Western parallel, that would be equivalent to looking at the passage of Jupiter through one of the signs of the zodiac, such that it does the whole zodiac round in 12 years. We've talked about how the cycles of the different planets can be divided into a notional human lifetime. We've looked at how they could be used as symbols of different phases of life. And we looked at the two great circles in the sky that the ancients studied, the circle of the zodiac, which involves the ecliptic, the path of the sun and the planets, because that path that the sun and the planets takes through the sky is against the background of the zodiac. And it's interesting just how much commonality there is between the way people have identified asterisms and constellations and what they see in them. How much of this is a category of the mind? Well, it may be that what we are looking at here is a form of, is it pareidolia? There is a word that describes how when we look at natural phenomena, we can, or even man-made phenomena, we can see patterns. It's possible to lie on one's back on a field and look up at the clouds and see in the clouds the pattern of a face or the pattern of a scene. Is it really there, ontologically, in reality, or is it just in our minds? An example like that would suggest that it's more in our minds than anything else. A lot of people looked at NASA photographs that came back from Mars with the Viking expedition back in the 70s. And there are a lot of people building a case on a particular configuration that was seen on the Martian surface, which looked like a kind of a sphinx, a head and a pyramidal complex, and it looked very convincing. Is it really there, and was it actually constructed by intelligent beings, or is this something that we assemble in our imagination? Is it more a category of the mind than a category of reality? And the same can be said of the patterns seen in stars. Asterisms like the Pleiades, a group of 7 stars. They've been called the 7 sisters in certain places and times. Or whole constellations like Leo the lion. We see a lion in there. And even if these are mental categories, they still have a psychological significance. They still have a relationship to what we might call the collective unconscious. And they can still influence people through that resonance and synchronicity. I thought we might have a look at some symbolism of the astrological glyphs. And I also thought we might talk a bit about an overlap of different subjects in the quadrivium. Remember from our liberal arts teaching that the 7 liberal arts of antiquity consisted of the trivium, a group of 3 subjects, and the quadrivium, a group of 4 subjects, which have to do more with numeracy than with literacy. Those 4 subjects were arithmetic, geometry, harmony, musical harmony, and astronomy. And whilst we've been focusing on astronomy, there is also a degree of overlap between astronomy and geometry and harmony. Some of these understandings can help us relate better to our fellow human beings. Understanding the angle that exists between a heavenly body at one point in time and at another point in time, or the angle that exists between somebody's natal sun and another person's natal sun, essentially a point of geometry. This can give us a bit of an insight into structures and dynamics within a relationship. And it can be a helpful thing, because if there are cosmic harmonies and if there are structures conditioning human relationships. The peacemaker would do well to understand something about them, because it is always better to work with the structures than to work against them. Working against them can lead to a lot of unnecessary conflict and frustration. Working with them can facilitate a relationship. I'll unpack that and explain what it means down the track a little bit, not too far down the track. There is unnecessary conflict when we don't correctly perceive or intuit the purpose of a relationship. If you're like me, you believe that there is a point, there is a purpose, a holy purpose, a constructive purpose in every one of our relationships. Even in every contact that we have with other human beings, there is an overshadowing, governing purpose that we may or may not be aware of. Every encounter can conduce towards good or towards evil, and so it can either thwart or facilitate the efforts of the peacemaker. If we look at the glyphs of the luminaries and planets, they tell a story too. A glyph is a symbol, essentially. You may have seen them. We're not using visuals up in these transmissions this year. Perhaps we'll bring them on stream next year, but we'll have a bit more time to do that then. But I'll need to describe them for you. There's a lot to symbols. Numbers are symbols. Our Arabic numerals are based on Hindu numerals, and people like Al-Kindi were able to transmit the symbolism in numbers via the Middle East to Europe. And there's a lot of intelligence in the way that in the morphology of the numeral, in how they are constructed. Because if you think about the number 1, it's a straight line. And the shape of the numeral can tell you something about the nature of, in this case, unity. Numbers, as we know them, the Hindu numerals become Arabic numerals, our numerals, are composed of a combination of curves and straight lines. The sun and the moon and the planets have symbols that are also a combination of curves and straight lines. The sun, for example, is a circle with a centre. It bespeaks something in the middle and radiating in all directions. A whole. The moon is depicted in its glyph as 2 semicircles, one tucked inside the other. So there's curve, there's nothing straight in there, and it symbolises reflection. If you like, the inner semicircle is a reflection of the outer semicircle. And the moon is considered the great reflector because it shines not of its own light like the sun, but by the reflected light of the sun. The moon is also considered the mother of form. Also, when you think of semicircles, they are like cups turned on an angle, and the cup is a very receptive vessel. The cup holds, the cup receives. So too does the moon receive. The moon receives light on a purely astronomical, physical level. But this symbolises, of course, the receptive principle that is the moon. It's like human consciousness receives the light of the spirit and gives it form and gives it substance. There are ideas, but we conceive of them and we elaborate upon them and give them form. But we receive, where there's a reception that takes place with conception. And so this is why the moon is the great receiver and the mother of form. It forms our consciousness. And therefore our personality. Whereas the sun symbolises our individuality that's made clear in the glyph of the sun, of the circle in the centre, as unified, as having one point or focus, I. Now, if you turn to, let's go to Venus and Mars. You've seen the symbol for Venus. It's the same as the symbol for the female. It comes out on International Women's Day on the 8th of February. You can see it in different places to signify the female. And it consists of a cross surmounted by a circle. Now, if you think of the cross as a symbol of conflict and strife, because it is a rigid frame, and wherever you have 90 degrees angles, you have rigidity and tension. If you want to give a piece of furniture some stability, you'll use the cross or the truss or the brace. You'll give it 4 legs, and so it doesn't move, it's not fluid. And of course, the cross has other associations with carrying one's cross and crucifixion. When you put it all together, you get the glyph of the cross means conflict and strife, and locked into that scenario, that conflicted scenario. No easy escape. The circle is harmony and ease. If you want to make people in a group feel at ease, you'll place the chairs in a circle, then everybody is on the same level. It's a different setup from the old-fashioned schoolroom or lecture hall, where people sit here and the lecturer sits up the front. That creates a bit of a division. Straight lines do tend to create polarity and division. Back to the symbol of Venus, if you have a circle surmounting a cross, you have harmony prevailing over conflict or strife. So Venus, with its associations of love and sociability, is indicated by that symbol. because love and sociability are about harmony prevailing over strife. Venus is associated with beauty, harmony, peace, rest, the social graces, the goddess, the beautiful goddess. Now, if you reverse that symbol, you've got the male symbol. The circle's on the bottom and it's surmounted by a cross. And that's adapted to a surmounting with like a spear shape. If you think about the symbol for the male, for men, it's a circle with a kind of javelin point coming out of it. An adaptation of the cross. It's also a very male or phallic symbol. Again, it's strife prevailing over harmony. Because the rigid part that involves the line is placed on top of the circular part. That's why Mars is associated with war. The Roman god Mars is the god of war. Mars is associated with energy, activation, conflict, initiation, and assertion. And you see how that has been built into the glyph, the symbol. So whoever put these symbols together knew what they were doing. They're as old as the hills. I can't tell you who put them together, but a lot of intelligence has gone into this, a lot of understanding of the human psychology and of energy dynamics. If we look at the symbol of Mercury, we will see a cross surmounted by a circle, surmounted by a semicircle. Now, where might you have seen this? You may have seen it in medical symbols, perhaps?
Anchor.
Anchor? Oh, in an anchor, a ship's anchor.
Yes.
It's the other way around. But see, Mercury's got that receiving dish on top, and then the circle, and then the cross. So people may have seen it combined with a caduceus in a medical symbol. So harmony is prevailing over conflict by means of a receptive consciousness or mind. So it's only through that receptive intelligence that the harmony prevails over conflict. So there has to be reception of ideas, there has to be reason operating in order for harmony to prevail over conflict. It's not the normal state of affairs. It's through that light of illumination that it occurs, through the mental clarity that it occurs. And this comports very well with Mercury being the messenger god. These gods are principles. They form a pantheon, but they are also, in psychology, just used as psychological principles, and that's how I'm using them here. The symbol for Jupiter is a semicircle attached to a cross. And the symbol for Saturn is approximately the inverse of that, just as Mars was the inverse of Venus. So with Saturn you have a cross surmounting a curve, a semicircle. Can you visualize that, Belinda? With Jupiter you have a semicircle, the curve, surmounting the cross, and with Saturn you have the cross surmounting the semicircle. what this means is that in Jupiter's case, above the conflicts and the strifes of material existence, the receptive mind can make meaning and find purpose and meaning. It can triumph over adversity. Whereas in the case of Saturn, the mind is often confounded, and what meaning it has found can be confounded, disrupted by the suffering, the strife, the adversity of life. It's living under limitation. And when in living under limitation, the frustrating thing is not understanding what the suffering is for, what all the limits are for, what all this hardship is that I have to go through. So there's a deep meaning attaching to the glyph for the planet Saturn and the glyph for the planet Jupiter. And when you go to the outer planets, you have Uranus's two semicircles with a cross in the middle over a circle at the bottom. So in a way, you've got in the core of the glyph, you've got a circle surmounted by a cross, a bit similar to Mars. So strife is prevailing over harmony there, but it is buffered and channeled by these two receptor dishes, these two curves on the side. Attached to the arms, to the cross, the horizontal arm of the cross. So through this conflict and adversity, there are two sides of the human intelligence communicating with each other and bringing about a kind of a balance and an understanding of the situation. Some people see this as the lower mind and the higher mind. You might consider it as the concrete intelligence and the abstract intelligence. In Platonic philosophy, there was a part of the mind that had to do with perception that was outturned, that ordered the material of sense, and there was a part of the mind that was turned towards the realm of ideas, intuiting ideas, and these two are brought together in the symbol of Uranus. Then we have the symbol of Neptune, which is the trident. You've probably seen mythological depictions of the god of the sea, Neptune, whom the Greeks called Poseidon, holding a trident, which is like a fork with three prongs. And essentially, it's a cross with the curve cutting through the upper arm of the cross. So the cross is piercing through this curve. And so all of the travail of conflict on this planet is penetrated. It's penetrating the mind, the consciousness, but the consciousness is also penetrating it. So mundane reality is interpenetrated with consciousness. And this speaks to Neptune's association with hallucination, dream, idealism as a philosophical principle, in the sense of, is this world around us mental or material? There's something of that in the symbol of Neptune. Finally, Pluto is a cross surmounted by the curve, surmounted by the circle. So it's like the circle is sitting in a cup and they're mounted on the cross. It's three components. And so Pluto is actually the glyph is symbolic of the process of transmutation. Transmutation occurs when something in one state is changed into another state. Einstein said that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, that energy and matter are interconvertible. Well, here, the cross is like the material. And in the material realm, there seems to be more strife because things are separated out, particulate, and always in a state of flux. And then above that is the curve, consciousness. And then above that is the circle of spirit. So we've got spirit, soul, and body. And there's an ancient teaching across a lot of spiritual traditions that there is a tripartite constitution of the human being. Three parts: the somatic, the psychical, and the pneumatic. The body, the soul, and the spirit. And they can interpenetrate. And matter can be understood as essentially as spirit at a lower rate of vibration. And spirit can be understood as one and the same as matter at a higher rate of vibration. Like there is a continuum, there's a discreteness too. There is a very clear sense in which spirit and matter can be seen as two metaphysical substances. But with the energy hypothesis, which is the flip side of this, they can be seen on a spectrum of energy as well. So spirit and matter are one, but they're also two. And it sounds paradoxical, but we can't reduce it any further than that. When there's a nuclear explosion, the matter in terms of the atoms or the protons and neutrons are released into energy, into vibration. That's why Pluto rules nuclear energy. And its discovery was in 1930, about the time that human beings were turning their minds towards the release of the potential of the atom. And then there became a race to develop the atomic bomb. So this is the transmutation of energy. And some people see resurrection, such as what happened to Jesus, as a transmutation of energy, the body becoming energy. So whether we're looking at it in terms of a lump of uranium or plutonium, or in terms of alchemical transformation or resurrectional transformation of the human being, this is what the Pluto glyph is meant to suggest. And the time in which the planets were discovered also shows you their connection to the culture and the collective consciousness, the consciousness that generations participate in. Now, all of the planets from Saturn on inwards were known to the ancients. We talked about that. They could see those with the naked eye, as we can today. But you need a telescope to see Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Now, Uranus was discovered at a time when the great revolutions were getting underway. America was being founded. There was going to be the American Revolution had just happened, and the French Revolution was around the corner. and democracy was making its appearance on the planet in a very fierce way. Neptune was discovered at a time when all we had for visual reproduction was the brilliant expertise of our painters. If you wanted to record what something looked like, you get a painter to do a painting. But then photography started to be developed around the time of Neptune's discovery. So daguerreotype and producing photographs, and then the development of that art, and then the development of film and motion picture, videography, and so on, has coincided with the appearance, the sighting of Neptune. Because Neptune rules that imagination. It can create an imaginary world that can match or supersede this world, just as great fiction can suck us into a world that sometimes it seems more compelling, far more compelling than our normal lives. Remember the glyph of Neptune. The receptor dish of that curve interpenetrates the cross. It blurs the distinction between dream and reality, illusion and reality, just as the film industry does. And then again, Pluto is discovered at a time when humanity is on the brink of the nuclear age. So all of that has some meaning. And these planets, yes, they influence or they correspond with forces in the individual's lives, but not individual per se. They work through the collectivity. Uranus through the generation. We talk about the boomers or the millennials or Gen Z, and these people are born with Uranus hovering at a particular place in the zodiac. So all of them are, well, in their natal charts or nativities. And this is the other place, of course, where you've seen the astrological glyphs. If you've ever looked at a natal chart, a horoscope, you'll see it crowded with symbols. And these are the symbols that are used. And so people born around the time that I was will have Uranus similarly positioned in their nativity because it's slow moving compared to the inner planets, and Neptune even more so, and Pluto even more so, slow moving. I think Pluto can take like 200 and up to 250 years to make a round. Uranus, of course, takes 84 years. So if it was in Virgo when I was born, then it's going to be in Virgo for 7 years. And so that particular energetic pattern of Uranus in Virgo is going to influence people born in that 7-year period. We might leave it at that for now. So we've covered the symbols of the planets. And one could do a similar analysis for the symbols used for the zodiac signs. That might be done at another time.